Dean Martin did refuse a blank check from the Mafia. That part is true, and the moment he said no, his entire life quietly changed. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Las Vegas was not the Las Vegas people know today. It was not glossy, it was not corporate, it was not safe. Vegas was a desert town powered by neon lights, easy money, and organized crime. If you worked there, you worked around the Mafia whether you admitted it or not. Dean Martin knew this better than most. Before the tuxedos, before the Rat Pack, before the effortless smile that looked like it had never worried about anything in its life, Dean Martin was Dino Crosti. He was the son of Italian immigrants. He grew up around men who settled problems quietly, men who did not raise their voices, men who did not forgive disrespect. Dean understood that world, he never pretended otherwise. By the time he started performing in nightclubs, the Mafia already controlled most of the top venues. They owned the casinos, they owned the back rooms. They decided who played, who got paid, and who disappeared from the schedule without explanation. And when Dean Martin walked on stage, they noticed. He did not shout. He did not beg for attention. He stood still, leaned into the microphone, and made the room listen. Women leaned forward. Men stopped talking. Money slowed down. To the Mafia, that was power. At first, they treated him like an investment. They booked him, they paid him well, they protected him. If a drunk got too close or a rival club owner caused trouble, it was handled before Dean even knew there was a problem. But protection always came with strings. By the early 1950s, Dean Martin was becoming more than a nightclub singer. His partnership with Jerry Lewis had exploded. They were selling out theaters, Hollywood wanted him. The money was no longer small or local, it was national. That is when the offer came. It did not come in writing. It did not come in a meeting room. It came quietly, over drinks, from men who smiled politely and never introduced themselves properly. They told him they wanted to take care of him. They told him they could finance anything he wanted. Films, records, shows, residencies, tour, no limits, no questions, no paperwork. One of them slid something across the table. A check. Unsigned. Unfilled. Blank. They told him to write any number. This was not generosity, this was ownership. If Dean took that check, his career would belong to them forever. Every success would be theirs, every favor would be collected with interest, and if he ever tried to walk away, he would not be walking alone. Dean Martin looked at the check. He did not joke. He did not smile. He did not stall. He pushed it back. He said no. In that world, saying no was not bravery, it was danger. The men did not argue, they did not threaten him. They simply nodded, folded the check, and ended the conversation. Dean finished his drink and left. That night, he did not sleep. Because he knew exactly what refusing the Mafia meant. They did not forget. They did not forgive. They waited. Within weeks, things began to change. Bookings disappeared without explanation. Clubs he had headlined for years suddenly claimed scheduling issues. Promoters stopped returning calls. Agents became distant. The air around his career felt colder. No one said why, no one needed to. Dean Martin had crossed an invisible line. And he had done it alone. Jerry Lewis was rising fast, loved by studios, embraced by executives who preferred safe investments. Dean, on the other hand, was seen as the quieter half of the duo, the crooner, the risk. When tensions between Dean and Jerry began to grow, the pressure from outside forces made it worse. Studios whispered that Jerry was the future, that Dean was replaceable. The Mafia did not push, they did not rush, they let doubt do the work. They believed he would come back. Most men did. But Dean Martin did something unexpected. He walked away from Jerry Lewis. Hollywood thought he had destroyed himself. The public thought he was finished. And the Mafia watched closely. Because a man who refused a blank check and then walked away from the biggest comedy partnership in America was either very foolish or very dangerous. What happened next would redefine power in Las Vegas, reshape Hollywood friendships, and quietly prove that Dean Martin was never as careless as he pretended to be. After the split with Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin was supposed to fail. That was the story everyone believed. Studio executives believed it. Press columnists wrote it. Club owners whispered it behind his back. And the Mafia waited for it. The logic was simple. Jerry Lewis was loud, physical, obvious. He was easy to market. Dean Martin was smooth, subtle, relaxed. To people who sold movies by volume, subtle looked like weakness. Offers slowed, scripts stopped coming. He was suddenly difficult to place. Dean Martin did not complain. He had grown up watching men survive worse by saying less. Instead of chasing roles, he leaned into what he did best: singing, presence, control. He took smaller stages, smaller rooms, but in those rooms he owned the air, he stretched songs, he slowed jokes, he let silence do the work. Audiences noticed something new. Dean Martin alone was not half of anything, he was something else entirely. Meanwhile, in Las Vegas, the Mafia watched carefully. They did not blacklist him openly, that would draw attention. Instead, they applied pressure quietly. A cancelled show here, a delayed payment there, a venue that suddenly preferred another act. Dean understood the message. Come back. Accept the money. Everything gets easy again. He did not respond. What the Mafia underestimated was Dean's patience. He was not flashy off stage. He lived simply compared to other stars. He did not gamble recklessly. He did not chase headlines. He did not burn money trying to prove anything. And then something shifted. Hollywood began to see him differently. When Dean Martin was cast in dramatic roles, critics were surprised. He could act, not loudly, not theatrically, but truthfully. He played men who hid pain behind charm because he understood that man intimately. His career stabilized. Then Frank Sinatra stepped in. Frank had his own complicated relationship with the Mafia. He was close to certain figures. He was rumored to owe favors. He was protected but also watched. Frank respected Dean's refusal. He never said it publicly, but privately he admired it. When Frank began forming what would later be known as the Rat Pack, Dean Martin was essential, not because he needed Dean's fame, but because he needed Dean's balance. Dean was the calm center, the man who did not posture, the man who made danger feel like a joke without disrespecting it. Vegas noticed. Casinos wanted the Rat Pack, they brought crowds, they brought money, and suddenly Dean Martin was back on the biggest stages in the city he had once angered. The Mafia allowed it, but they did not forget. Behind the scenes, Dean kept his distance. He did not attend private meetings, he did not accept favors, he did not borrow money, he paid in cash when possible, he stayed polite and untouchable. This frustrated them, because power depends on leverage, and Dean Martin gave them none. Then came the television era. When Dean Martin launched his own variety show, it was a massive success. Millions watched him every week. He became not just a Vegas star or a film actor, but a household name. That kind of exposure was protection. The Mafia understood visibility. Killing a nightclub singer was one thing, touching a national television icon was another. Dean had outgrown them, but success came with a cost. He leaned harder into the public persona of the carefree drunk, the man who did not care, the man who floated through life with a glass in his hand and no worries in his heart. It was a shield. If people believed he was careless, they would never see how carefully he moved. Behind the scenes, he was disciplined. He arrived on time. He knew his lines. He watched who spoke to him and who stopped speaking when others entered the room. He trusted very few people. And he trusted the Mafia not at all. By the late 1960s, Dean Martin had done what almost no one else had done. He had refused them. He had survived. And he had thrived. But the story did not end with victory. Because refusing power does not mean escaping its shadow. And one quiet decision, years later, would prove that Dean Martin understood the price of independence better than anyone. By the time Dean Martin reached the height of his fame, he had everything the blank check once promised. Money, freedom, control, but he also carried something heavier. Distance. Dean Martin was friendly but not close. He laughed easily but trusted slowly. People mistook his warmth for openness. It was not. It was armor. The Mafia never came back with another offer. That was not how they worked. Once a door closed, they simply built around it. But there were consequences. Some film deals vanished at the last minute. Some business partnerships fell apart without explanation. Some people who once returned his calls suddenly did not. Dean never asked why. He already knew. Frank Sinatra remained loyal, but even Frank could not always shield him. Frank's own ties made him unpredictable in the eyes of both Hollywood and organized crime. Dean stayed careful, never placing himself in situations where favors would be expected. He paid for his independence with loneliness. At home, his marriages suffered. He was present physically, absent emotionally. He did not share his fears. He did not explain his caution. He carried it quietly. When his son, Dean Paul Martin, was born, something softened. For a while, he allowed himself hope. He wanted to be present. He wanted to be better. But old habits do not vanish easily. He worked constantly, touring, filming, performing, always moving, always visible. Visibility was safety. Then tragedy struck. In 1987, Dean Paul Martin died in a plane crash while serving as a pilot in the Air National Guard. Dean Martin was shattered. The man who had stared down mobsters and refused their money without flinching could not stand upright at his son's funeral. Something in him closed permanently. He withdrew, he stopped performing, he stopped appearing. The public saw it as retirement. Those who knew him understood it was retreat. The Mafia was no longer a concern. The industry had changed. Corporations had replaced families, contracts replaced handshakes. Dean had outlived the danger, but the cost remained. He spent his final years quietly, watching television, sitting alone, avoiding crowds. The man who once commanded rooms now preferred silence. When Dean Martin died in 1995, tributes poured in. They spoke of his voice, his charm, his timing. Few spoke of his courage. Few spoke of the moment he pushed a blank check back across a table and chose uncertainty over ownership. In an industry built on compromise, Dean Martin made one of the rarest decisions possible. He said no, and he lived with it. Dean Martin's refusal did not make headlines. It did not become legend during his lifetime. There was no dramatic confrontation, no public fallout, no cinematic showdown. That is what made it real. Real power struggles happen quietly. The Mafia expected Dean Martin to need them. Hollywood expected him to collapse without Jerry Lewis. The public expected him to drift through life without consequence. They were wrong. Dean Martin understood something most people never do. Money given without effort is never free. Protection offered without request is never safe. And charm, when underestimated, can be the sharpest defense of all. By refusing that blank check, Dean Martin set the terms of his own life. He accepted struggle over control, uncertainty over obligation. It cost him opportunities. It cost him ease. It may have even cost him peace. But it kept his name clean in a world that did not forgive debt. Today, Las Vegas markets nostalgia. The Rat Pack is myth. The mob stories are told with a wink and a smile. But behind the myth was a man who knew when to smile, when to stay silent, and when to walk away. Dean Martin did not beat the Mafia. He simply refused to belong to them. And sometimes that is the bravest ending of all. If you enjoyed this story and want more untold moments from old Hollywood, moments where quiet decisions changed everything, take a second to subscribe. These stories only survive if they are remembered.